Welcome to MCN and the BMW R1300GS. Now this is one of our 2024 MCN long-term test fleet bikes and it's being run by Richard Newland. Hello there.
Hello
You're
there.
our group editor.
I am, yes.
And I've asked you to compile a list,
Yep.
as we do every year, of things you like and don't like so much about the bike. But just before we run into this list, just let me know a little bit about where you've been on the bike, how many miles you've done and how long you've had it.
Yeah, so turned up in March. I've done just over 10,200 miles on it in that
Yep.
time. Haven't left the country, which has been a massive disappointment to me. I
It's a lot of miles in England.
planned to escape
Yeah.
if I could, but yeah, didn't manage to this year. So a lot of it's been just commuting mileage, but an awful lot of it as well has been sort of big Sundays where I just go and escape and pull the pin and do a 500-mile day.
Yeah.
But then actually last Saturday I did 1,000 miles in 22 hours on it.
Oh, mate.
I really wanted to get over the 10,000 mark, and it goes back soon. And
Yeah.
and myself and Justin, who's running one of our other long-term test bikes this year, the Harley Davidson,
Yeah.
we thought, well, let's go and do 1,000-mile day on them. You know, they're built to do that sort of distance, so let's
Yeah.
put it to the test. So yeah, we set off at 6 in the morning and got home at about 3:30 the following morning. So
Where
yeah,
did you go?
So we started in just outside Ely in Cambridgeshire, and then we headed up over the Humber Bridge, went up to Lindisfarne, went across onto the island. Luckily we got the tide times right, or that would have been very awkward.
Yeah.
And then headed up north, about half an hour north of Dundee, up to Forfar sort of
Wow.
area. So we were going from actually Harley Davidson founders site in Ely, basically. Up to the Davidson cottage up in Forfar. So it was really Justin's trip, and I just said, well, I'll come along.
Yeah.
I want to do the mileage, and it was about 840 miles. So I said, well, I'll come and we'll add a bit on, shall we, and make it 1,000-mile day.
Wow.
So yeah, for me it was 1,012 miles in 22 hours 50 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Good going.
it was good going, and remarkably effortless as well.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
mean, you'd think that would be tiring, wouldn't you? But I've felt more knackered doing 100 miles on some bikes than
Yeah,
we
exactly.
did doing 1,000
Yeah.
on these. So yeah, incredible.
And which model is this bike?
So this is the Tramontana
Yep.
edition.
And what does that mean?
It means you get loads of extras and
Yeah.
gold things and yeah, bolt-ons. So I mean, this bike, you can see it's got a fair few accessories on it, but the obvious ones, if you can see it sneaking under that pannier, it's got the Akropovich end can on it.
Yep.
You've got the gold wheels, you've got all the electronic assists and extras. So it sort of takes most of the things that you can get in the catalogue, and it just packages them all together. I call it a Tramontana edition, and that's it. So it's about 2.5 grand's worth of extra stuff. But it sort of makes it that premium offering that most people buy anyway. So
Yeah.
rather than just speccing each item individually and having to add it all up, you just go, I'll have that one, please.
And
it's
that's
got
on top of
everything
it
on
being the top spec model as well. Is it a TE?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So what would this cost?
So in the trim you see here, it'd be about £23,000, but the Tramontana edition starts from about 19.5. So you can then add more and more packages in to get the full spec, but this has got every bell and whistle going. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, you're looking at around 23,000.
Yeah. So arguably, this is probably the most important bike to come out in 2024. I did the launch
Yep.
about this time last year, end of 23.
Yep.
Eagerly anticipated. It, you know, took over from another icon, the 1250.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of those as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really interested to hear what your experience has been with it, because it's a bike that's divided opinion in many ways, from people that haven't ridden it
Yep.
and the people that have lived with it. So let's start with the things that you love about this bike.
Okay.
So you said that it's smaller, lighter, more compact and more
Yep.
manageable than the old one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you see it when you put the two next to each other, and it's really
Yeah.
obvious. You know, whether it's the frontal sort of view or side.
This
on.
almost looks like Mini-Me.
It does, yeah, it does. It's like they put it in the wash and
Yeah.
it was a bit too warm and it shrunk. But yeah, in every sort of dimension, it looks smaller, it feels smaller. The weight, you do notice it, but it's not as transformative really as the dimensions. You're just not wielding as much bike around.
Yeah.
In every sense. So yeah, it's more manageable because of that. It feels less unwieldy, and then some of the other things that are on the list compound that impression as well, mainly the suspension and the clever tricks that plays. But yeah, you do notice it, and it does feel better for it. And equally, I've heard people criticise it and say, "Oh, it's not a sort of a big manly bike anymore." You're like, well, it is still pretty big and manly if that's what you're after.
Yeah.
But it's just not as unwieldy as it was in 1250 guise.
Yes. Okay. And the next thing you said, the composure of the semi-active suspension is sublime.
Yeah, it is. So semi-active front and rear on this. And I mean, we say it a lot, and it's terribly cliched, but it really does iron the road flat. And it's sort of brilliant, and it's sort of terrible at the same time, because it ruins you for every other bike.
Yep.
Because it really does just iron the road flat for you. But also it means you carry an awful lot more speed than you intend to. So you're sort of tanking down a B road thinking, I could get off and walk, really. You know, this is all very relaxed and comfortable. And then you look down at the speedo and go, okay, I might shut the throttle a little bit now. And it's not because you're trying to be fast. It just sort of allows you to tramp on.
Yep.
And you know, most of the other bikes I ride on a weekly basis are older super bikes. And I'll be going everywhere way slower on those. Because you're getting bucked out the seat. You know, the roads are terrible, and you're sort of worried about not being able to see anything because you're 2 foot lower and you can't see over the hedgerows or the car in front of you. Whereas this, I mean, from A to B cross country, it's extraordinarily fast.
The handling is superb on it, isn't it?
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that about it. And you know, whether it's a quick blast or a 1,000-mile day in the saddle, it just makes everything so effortless. It's incredible. And of course, front and rear is unusual to have this level of feedback with that front end as well.
With the funny front end, and the
funny front end. Yeah, absolutely. But it does make a big difference because you don't get any of that dive either. The suspension's having to work less hard already to combat what's going on. So yeah, it really does deliver an amazing ride quality.
Yep. And staying on suspension, you like the lowering suspension function. It's clever, seamless and useful, and works front and rear.
Yeah, it's super clever. Now the weird thing is, I don't use it on a daily basis, really, other than when manoeuvring the bike. So you can set it in auto mode, so that every time you slow down, you get below a certain speed, and it'll just
comes into land,
graciously drop down for you, helping those shorter of leg to feel more confident, which is important on a bike this size. But I actually prefer it being in the higher setting all the time. So I don't use that auto setting very often. Times when I might use it off-road, just so that, you know, when the speed really drops, you're already low. But of course, if you're in particularly tricky terrain, then you've removed a load of ground clearance. So it's debatable which way you'd go with that. If you're just on sort of slimy, not rough terrain, then I'd let it drop. But if I was on rough terrain, I'd keep it in the higher position. But for normal road use, I just keep it in the top position all the time, and I find that great. But then when you stop, kick the side stand down and kill the engine in, it just drops straight away. So then if you're paddling back into like I do, I paddle back on a gravel drive into a garage every night. It's great because you just kick it down and suddenly you've got loads of movement because you're right down with it, and you've got the leverage you need to push back. So I use it, but maybe not in the way it was originally designed.
And the side stand doesn't keep the bike too upright with it lowered?
No, it's all right, yeah.
Sometimes that's a problem, isn't it?
Well, I mean, this now on the side stand is obviously in the lowered position, so probably can't quite see from the camera, but it's reasonably canted over. And you don't get any of those problems where there are certain bikes where you've
got to lean it the
drop
wrong
down,
way.
and then you can't get the side stand down.
Especially two up.
Exactly. So yeah, none of that with this. It's spot on. Yeah.
And interestingly, at the launch, they were saying one of the reasons they don't go to telescopic forks and they keep with telelever is to have that function, because they couldn't do that with telescopic forks.
No, absolutely. And it really does work. You notice it.
Yeah.
It's surreal, isn't it, when you start it up and you go to pull away and you feel the back come up.
Citroen DS.
And then, we're showing our age there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really works. It's great.
Great with a pillion on board. You barely notice they're there. So how many have you lost?
3, I think. Yeah. Never seen them again. No. They were nice people as well. It's a real shame. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a great fan of having a pillion on a bike, to be honest. I love biking as a solitary pursuit, and but yeah, when you take a pillion, I've done quite a lot of miles this year actually with a pillion on board, and it's great. And the old one was great as well, to be fair. It's not like this bike's suddenly brilliant and the old one wasn't.
Exactly.
They're both the same. But yeah, you don't notice it. And again, the funny front end comes into play because you're not getting all that weight transfer of the extra person as well. But yeah, you just don't notice it there. I think the only thing I'd say is you do sense a slight dulling in the crispness of the power delivery, just from having the extra mass on board. But other than that, yeah, it doesn't unsettle the bike. You can ride exactly as you would ride solo.
And it's self-leveling rear?
Yeah.
So you don't have to make any adjustments, it just sorts itself out?
They hop on and it works it all out for you. It's great.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, effortless. Absolutely effortless.
Right, next one on the list is it's very fruity and thrilling with the traction control turned off, like a massive supermoto.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you've ridden it with everything switched off as well, but when you've got everything switched on, you can feel it's always sort of wanting to pour the air a bit, and it's it's perfectly fruity, isn't it? It's a nice place to be. With it off, it's really quite aggressive.
Yeah.
I was quite surprised, really. So yeah, I mean, first, second, third gear, hard on the throttle, it'll just lift on its own. And in fourth, if you have a crest or a little bump in the road or something, and it'll come up if you're on the power. Obviously, if you provoke it, it's effortless. But yeah, coming out of corners, it'll just lift out of corners, and it holds the line nicely as well.
And we were at Deanthorpe Airfield recently. We saw you on this demonstrating exactly what you're talking about.
I may have demonstrated that on one occasion.
Yeah.
No, it's amazingly. Sort of reminds me of the old HP2 Enduro, if you remember those.
Yeah, they're brilliant. They've almost made an XR rather than a GS in terms of performance.
Yeah, it's way closer, isn't it? Yeah, a few people have said that this year, and but I'm not the world's biggest fan of the XR because I find the engine buzzy and vibey.
Yeah, this is kind of.
Whereas this has that sort of character and drive.
Warm engine note,
Absolutely. But in terms of sort of what it does for you, it's way
very,
closer,
very sporty.
Way closer to the XR.
You said it sounds great with a lovely mellow bark that people often comment on. Yep. This version wears the official accessory of Popovich,
Yeah, so we've mentioned the Acca already. But yeah, funnily enough, on the bike it sounds nice, but it must sound much nicer off the bike because lots of people go, "Oh, I heard you coming." It sounded really, really nice.
It's like a race engine almost, like a battle of the twins.
Yeah. No, it's really raughty, and obviously it's got the quick shifter auto blipper as well, so you get that sort of bar, and coming back down through the box is nice as well. But yeah, I mean, sound's a big part of biking, isn't it? It's one of the reasons that people reject electric stuff so much, because you've lost all of that sort of emotive connection. Yeah. And this does sound lovely. But GSs have always sounded nice, haven't they, really?
100%.
They've always been, it's always been a good soundtrack to play to.
So away from the sportiness, you said that it devours miles like you devour a curry. Just exceptional.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we've already touched on it with the 1,000 mile day the other day, but I've done loads of 500, 300, 400 mile days in the saddle. And apart from a slight bit of discomfort, which we'll talk about in the dislikes, yeah, it's just so easy, so easy. I mean, genuinely, people look at me like I'm deranged when I say we did a 1,000 mile day.
Yeah, me included.
Effortless. But honestly, well, to put it in context for you, so when I was nearly home, I was 4 miles from home, and I knew that by the time I got home, I was still going to be 4 miles short of 1,000 miles. So I went and did a lap of Rutland Water, and that's how I ended up at 1,012.
Yeah.
But at that point, you're not going, "Oh, I can't do any more of this," I'm just stopping. And when I got home, I was still so awake and fine that I didn't even go straight to bed. I just sat up and read a couple of chapters of a book and then went to bed an hour later. Just honestly, as awake as I am now, which maybe says as much about how I'm awake now. But, but no, genuinely, it's.
I wonder where 1,000 miles would get you from Calais. Get you well into Spain, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, it'd get you to well into Austria, because I've done that before. I've done here to Red Bull Ring. That's about 950 miles.
Really?
So I did that on a KTM Super Duke GT in one hit, both ways. Yeah, much my wife's upset when I walked in the door at 8 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Full of Red Bull.
Exactly. Right then.
So next on the good list is the rider modes actually make a difference to the bike's performance and capabilities.
Yeah, so, well, as you know, on some bikes you sort of flick through the modes and you're riding along and you think, has that really done anything of any significance? And on a lot of bikes it doesn't really. On this it really does. So, you've got multiple modes available, although you can only have a certain number of them live at any one moment. I use Dynamic Pro mode on the road all the time, not because I'm particularly dynamic, or a pro, but it gives you everything the bike can do. And I never understand the point in sort of spending all the money on something this good and then not using all of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. So Dynamic Pro on the road, and then off-road I use Enduro Pro mode. Again, I'm definitely no pro off-road, but it gives you that electronic support that you need to enable you to ride how you think you ought to be able to ride off-road.
Yeah.
And obviously on a bike of this scale, you need that support, particularly off-road. And it's amazing what it can allow the bike to do and how it interprets what you're asking it to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant systems. Like I say, I only really use those two modes. I never touch anything else. But I suppose I grew up in the era of not having them. So if it's raining, I just don't open the throttle as hard.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And is everything linked into it? Suspension and rider aids and everything?
And braking strategies and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything is linked, and it's a really cohesive thing. So again, it's not just sort of trying to sense whether the throttle's giving you something else. You can feel all the changes.
Properly gives you multiple bikes in one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really clever stuff.
Yeah.
Next on the list, the quick shifter and auto blipper is super smooth and effective at almost all speeds. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and from the sheer volume of miles you do on these sort of bikes, that sometimes it only works in a really narrow parameter, and you sort of, when you're in the sweet spot, it's amazing, and then the moment you're out the sweet spot, it becomes a frustration. Really isn't the case on this, and you do learn to ride it as well, so you can help it to do the job. So at very low speed, if you're coming down through the box, just being quite slow on the lever actually gives you more kill time, because it interprets it, or you can cheat it slightly. But no, it's amazingly good, and when you bear in mind that it's pushing those two enormous dish plates around, it's not like an inline four where it's a really smooth delivery, so it does really well to smooth out those changes for you. So yeah, no complaints at all. They've done a cracking job of that.
It's a really good system, isn't it?
Yeah.
And your final point on the things you love about this bike is the top box is very posh and lovely to use, although not perfect. So are these BMW items?
So the panniers aren't. We'll get to that in the dislikes, I think. But the top box is, so it's their new version. And it's a lovely thing, but it is slightly odd as well. So when you open it up, which we probably can't do. Oh, I can. There we go. So I'm sure Joe will do some cutaways on this, but when you can see when it opens, it's like a car boot. So normally you'd sort of have a flap on the top, and then everything would sit in it, whereas here I've got this enormous gap. Yeah. So if you're stacking stuff,
you can't.
It's
weird, isn't it?
It's a bit odd. And then you've got a clever little thing in here as well, which you can ratchet, and it becomes their Vario system, so you can then grow the amount of capacity you've got, which is very clever as well. You even get a little vanity light inside, like easy, so you can do your makeup. Hair and makeup, full service. So yeah, it's a lovely thing, and of course it's got BMW's central locking on it, so you can lock it either from the key, or when you lock the bike, set the bars and hit to set the lock for the steering, it will lock that as well, and it would lock the panniers if it had the BMW panniers on it, but it hasn't.
Okay, we'll come on to that then by the sounds of it.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the things you're not so keen about. Would you say hate, or is that too strong a
No, I
word?
really couldn't say hate, actually. It's been quite a challenge coming up. I mean, there's loads of little niggles, because there's loads of little niggles on any bike you have. Nothing is ever perfect, but yeah, I had to work quite hard at coming up with constructive things to criticise.
Well, let's start with the first one then. The lack of backlit switchgear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. It's not as if it's a new thing either, is it?
No, not at all. And it's, I mean, BMW have done a really good job of having as few buttons as possible, but there's still quite a few on there, and especially when you've got thicker gloves on in winter, as we are now, it's quite hard to just naturally feel what you're pressing. You've got two rocker switches here very close to each other. You've also got a quick menu function, and the hazard lights quite close to each other. Then of course you've got the rolly wheel, which is really easy, you don't need that to be lit. But God, it would make a huge difference to just be able to see those. You don't really need the right-hand switchgear to be lit, because you're not really doing anything with it when you're riding. But yeah, to have this left-hand cluster lit would be amazing.
I mean, you get that on A2 licensed KTMs, don't you? So
Well, I find myself riding along, you know, if you're on a big road or something, there's a car behind you, I find myself lifting my elbow so that their headlights just illuminate the buttons enough. But yeah, it's a frustration. And you just think, it can't be that hard.
No.
Everyone's managed it.
Exactly.
Sort it out.
Sort it out.
Yeah, so, and then, yeah, the only other thing to mention about the right-hand switchgear, I suppose, is I did have a failure on it early on in the loan. So the power switch is up here on the right-hand switchgear. It used to be on a big button down by the headstock, if you remember those.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really delicate little button up here now, and that also does the steering lock as well. So you just hold it down and that creates the lock. But yeah, one morning I did come to the bike to go out on an MCN event actually, press the button, nothing happened. Pressed it again, still nothing happened. And that was the story for another 4 days, where it was basically stranded in the garage. Annoyingly, it was blocking all my other bikes in, so I couldn't get the steering lock off.
Yeah.
So I had to drag all 243 kilos plus of it out the garage with the wheel locked. There's not enough room to sort of do the old side stand spinning, arcing thing. And then had to drag it back in again once I'd got a bike out. So that was decidedly suboptimal. But I think what happened is it was really wet the day before, and I think we're fairly sure there's an O-ring issue on really early bikes.
Right.
Because we had 2 fails, so we had the first test bike you might remember we had in, did the same thing out on the road. But absolutely no issues since. They changed the switchgear, obviously under warranty, and it's been absolutely perfect since. Not had a single moment with it at all.
They're good at addressing problems, BMW, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean they do have issues, but they are very good at dealing with them. And yeah, certainly that. There's been no repeat of any instance of that, and it's been out in some torrential weather. So yeah, worth noting, but again, fixed.
Okay. Right, second thing on your not so good list is the lack of adjustable seat height.
Yes, so it's 850mm, but on the old ones, if you remember, you used to have 2-stage height adjustability. So those longer of leg could choose to go a little bit higher. I'm not particularly long of leg. I've got a 31-inch leg, and I'm not particularly tall. I'm 5'11". But yeah, I just find it a bit cramped. And when you look at the sort of triangle between bars and pegs and seat, it's not that dramatically different to the old model, but it really makes a difference when you're on the bike. So after sort of about 100 miles-ish, I really notice it in my thighs. I just get a bit of sort of thigh burn, basically. Because you're always just taking a little bit of weight on your legs that you don't want to be.
What was it like after 1,000?
Well, weirdly, you sort of get past it and then it comes back again. So from sort of 100 to 300, it was a bit uncomfortable. And then after about 600, maybe I was just numb. I don't know.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it could have just been that. But no, it was sort of all right. And then really the last stretch, it was, it sort of comes back again. But it depends very much on the kind of roads you're riding. So if you're on a load of sort of gnarly, twisty B roads and you're always moving, you don't notice it at all. You know, I've done 500-mile days in the saddle on just A and B roads, and it doesn't manifest at all. But if you sit on a motorway for 100 miles, suddenly you're going, oh, just want to stretch your legs, and then of course that's exactly what you do. So yeah, slight frustration for me. Again, you know, give us an option to be an inch higher, and I'd be much happier. Right,
the next point on your list, and quite a worrying one really, I think.
Go on.
The engine's surprisingly rattly and loud at tick over or low speed.
Yeah, it's quite noisy, in a quite clattery sort of a manner, which was a bit of a surprise. There's nothing wrong with it, and it sounds absolutely beautiful when you're on the gas. But yeah, it's just a bit agricultural sounding at low speed.
And they're all like that, sir?
They do appear to be. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what was the old one like? Did that do it? The 1250?
Not as much, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering it. It's been over a year since I've ridden the 1250, but I don't remember it being as
I've heard many
clattery.
people talk about the clattery engines on these and not the others. So
yeah, no, it does appear to be a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a worrying terminal sort of a sound. It's just surprisingly noisy. I mean, I wear earplugs all the time, and I suppose it really resonated quite literally with me when I started the bike up without my earplugs in. It was like, Jesus, that's quite loud, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then put your earplugs back in and go, oh no, that is how it's been all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is quite noisy, which is just a surprise.
Just the way it is. Yeah. Right, next one is the dash, and the integrated nav feels a step or two behind the curve now. It's been around a while, hasn't it, this dash?
It has, and I mean you can see we've got the double stacked affair going on here with the connected ride sat nav at the top. But of course you've got turn by turn available through the main dash as well. So obviously one's a map, one's turn by turn. They're offering very different things. But obviously most bikes now, you just get a massive iPad-like TFT dash, and it's got everything in the same thing. So having this sort of tower of quite old school feeling solutions now does feel a bit out of date. So I think it's time really that they went a bit bigger and put everything in the same place and provided that solution really.
The rest of the dash is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's really nice, clear, easy to read, isn't it?
It's easy to navigate, and you know, typically BMW really, you press a button that you think ought to do something and it does. And all the menus are easily navigable, and you don't ever sort of think, well, where on earth would I find this or that? That's all fine. The only other weird thing I've had actually this year is that the clock in the sat nav and the clock in the head unit keep disagreeing.
Right.
And the head unit keeps defaulting to 8 minutes out of time, which I don't really understand. But
some sort of parallel universe.
It could well be. Maybe I'm just slow. Who knows? But yeah.
Right then, next one is, it doesn't quite have the character of the early GS iterations. It's very refined.
It's extremely refined, and it's odd, isn't it, to sort of cite that as a bit of a criticism, but it is. You know, they've developed it to the nth degree, and you know, the things that we often fall in love with are the imperfections.
Yeah.
Thank God, or I wouldn't be married. But it's that kind of characterful rough edges that you do sort of fall in love with a little bit, and there just aren't many of them anymore. It is a super refined package, but it's not like I know you've heard me criticise this before. It's not like having an S1000RR, which is sort of so clinical that it's really hard to fall in love with it. I do love this, you know, it makes me smile all the time. It has got character. It's just very, very refined.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, all the time it's a Boxer Twin is going to have some kind of character compared to before, but, you know, a lot of the rough edges have been smoothed off.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe not to the bike's benefit. Okay, next one is 19-litre tank's range is about 200 miles, which feels too little. Bring on the GSA.
Yeah,
that is a glaring omission, really, why they don't do a big tanked, normal GS.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, the GSA obviously is literally just around the corner now. And I've always loved the GSA. I mean, I've had numerous GSAs as long-term test bikes in the past. As we've already established, I quite like riding a long way without stopping. So having a 300+ mile tank range versus a 200+ mile tank range really does make a big difference.
Yeah.
It just feels like you get there too early because you're so comfortable, because you're tanking on literally. You get through that 200 miles really easily. So yeah, I mean, it's still better than riding a CBR 600RR or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the bike makes you want to ride for further.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have the fuel capability as well.
I'm not the mile muncher that you are, but I prefer a bigger tank as well. Just when you're on a tour, when you're stopping at services, you can just have a coffee and you don't have to fill up every time. Yeah. You're not always going to the pump first and then...
Yeah. Well, you do a lot of big European tours, don't you? And you know, if you're smacking out that sort of mileage across, and you do like 3,000 miles in a week or something, it makes a big difference to how often you have to stop.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Of course, it's dictating to you that you're stopping, not you dictating to it that you're stopping. So, yeah.
No, it's weird, it's such a small tank.
Give us a big tank.
Give us a big tank, BMW. Right, number 7 on the list. The BMW had an epic fail with a luggage system, resulting in delays that are ongoing. I now have a top box, but no OEM panniers. Okay, so that's...
So we touched on this earlier. So this is the proper BMW top box, and the lovely thing it is too, there should be matching panniers to go with it. You'll notice that this, because you can see it all the way down the side of the pannier, says Wunderlich on it.
Yep.
That's because these are aftermarket accessories, which so these came from Nippy Normans. And they're really nice cases, but they're not what was designed, or not what BMW intended for the bike.
Yep.
So it should have a matching system to the top box, which then taps into the central locking, so that you don't have to be sticking a key in it all the time, whereas you have to put a key in these, albeit that they do come with the option to be coded. So I've actually coded the barrels to the ignition key, so there's no additional keys. You've still just got your normal BMW key, which is lovely. But obviously a lot of owners were really turned on by the fact that it was getting the central locking that was already available on other BMW bikes. But yeah, to date, and we're in what, middle of October now.
Yeah.
BMW still can't give me a set of panniers for this, and they're saying January 2025.
Wow, over a year after the bike came out.
Yeah, I know some consumers have had theirs through now, so it's not everybody that's waiting. But obviously, as a journalist, we're bottom of the pile because they need to get them out to paying customers.
That's right.
And rightly so. But yeah, they've had real problems, and the official response was that basically they were having locking events, as they described it, that were decidedly suboptimal, i.e. you could put the panniers on, but you might not be able to unlock them again. Either take them off the bike or get to the stuff that you put in it and shut the lid. So they've redesigned the locking mechanism that sits inside. So yeah, as they flow through to people now, they should be fine. Top box has been absolutely mint, no issues at all with that. Really reliable so far. Yep, it's been absolutely perfect. Genuinely, apart from the slightly odd sort of aperture,
it's weird.
I can't criticise it. It's been great. But yeah, it'd be lovely to have the panniers that are supposed to go with it. And then you've got all of that central locking capability across all of your luggage. So yeah, bit of a fail, but you know, clearly they didn't intend for that to happen, and they've done the right thing by saying we're not going to give them to you if they're not perfect.
Exactly.
So, yep,
Fair
unfortunate.
enough. Okay,
unfortunate.
number 8, warped brake discs, pulsing brakes.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by this actually. So the rear brake disc has been replaced a few weeks ago because there was a quite tangible pulse through the pedal, and that's quite annoying.
Yeah.
You know, I use the bike for absolutely everything. I don't just sit on a motorway and brake once every 300 miles. So, you know, I'm in traffic a lot of country lanes as well. So you use the back brake a lot. Plus, it's a big bike. So yeah, that was getting quite frustrating. So that's been changed, and that's been perfect since. That's probably done 1,500 miles since being replaced. No repeat of the issue yet. But now I've noticed I'm getting a pulse through the front lever. So yeah, there's something going on. And we were looking at the discs earlier, and they're reasonably well worn for a bike that's done 10,000 miles. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really know what's causing that, but certainly on this bike with 10,000 odd miles on the clock, I'd be pushing BMW to have replaced both ends at this stage. And like I say, the back's been done, but the front now needs attention as well.
Looking at.
It's not bad, you know. It's at gentle braking, you can just feel the little pulse. It's not like they're really pushing, but yeah, it's not something I've ever encountered on a BMW before, to be quite honest. So yeah, don't know what's going on there, but certainly this bike has not enjoyed its braking.
Staying down here, the wheels, they're bugger to clean.
Do you like the gold wheels?
I do, I like gold wheels.
Oh, everyone loves gold wheels.
Do you?
I don't. Yeah, not for me. Give me black wheels. I'm much happier with black wheels. So it's not so much the goldness of them that I dislike, actually, in all honesty. It's the fact they're an absolute bugger to clean. If you want to get them back to looking properly factory fresh, you can easily spend 45 minutes to an hour on each wheel, just really getting in there to get them clean. And you know, I ride in all weathers. As you can see, it's filthy. I came in an absolute deluge this morning, and I do ride it off road as well. So yeah, if you're going to use it and it's going to be fit for that purpose, it should come up clean a bit easier than that. And they've just got the way they're finished, they seem to just hold on to the dirt. It's really hard to get them clean again. So yeah, gold or black is entirely your own choice, but I want it to be able to be cleaned.
Quite a difficult bike to clean in general.
Yeah, although way easier than the old one.
Yeah, so I suppose there's more enclosed bodywork, isn't there?
Yeah, if you remember what an absolute pain the old one was, because you had all the trellis subframe as well, so sort of getting in there, you had to have a brush collection like... Well,
yeah, like a chimney sweep.
A top-level artiste. But yeah, this is way easier. So the whole bike is much easier to clean.
Right.
And generally, all of the finishes are amazing. So the whole bike comes up really clean, really easily. With the exception of the wheels.
Right.
So again, it sort of exacerbates the frustration, really, that you just think, well, you've done it with every other bit of paint and finish and on the bike, but the wheels are a pain to clean.
Which are the most important parts. So when the wheels are clean, everything else looks clean.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but no, they've done a good job otherwise, and like I say, not having that lattice, that trellis subframe anymore does make it much easier. And
finally, on your bad list, the bars are a bit too low for standing up off-road.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not particularly tall, but if you stand up off-road, you just feel like you're a little bit canted forward, and you've got your hands a bit too down by your knees. So I've actually got Evotech bar risers on here, so Evotech Performance, which is company not that far away up in Lincolnshire.
They're really good, aren't they?
They're beautiful, yeah, really well done. So those are, if I remember rightly, they're 40mm taller and 30mm more towards you.
Yep.
And it's absolutely perfect now. So stood up, you just fit. You know, it's what I do at 5'11". Absolutely perfect for me. The only downside is that obviously the bars are slightly closer and a little higher, so when you're seated and riding around on the road, it does push you back a little bit.
Right.
So it puts a little bit more weight into your bum. But all I do now is I just bend my arms more so that I'm back in the position I was before. Took about 50 miles to get used to, and then literally haven't noticed it since.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really good modification for me.
You talked about some other points to discuss. Tyres.
Yeah.
So you've had Metzeler Tourance Next 2s.
Yep, which was OEM fitment.
OEM.
So that's what it came on.
8,300 miles you got out of those.
That's mad, isn't it? A bike this big with me on it. Yeah, it's a lot of weight there.
And they're brilliant tyres as well.
They are exceptionally good. I've always loved the Tourance Next 2. I rather stupidly or rather amusingly, did a track day on a GS, a 1200 GS, at Saxonring on a set of Tourance Next.
Oh, I remember that.
So I rode all the way down there, did an open pit lane track day, and then rode back again on them, and they were amazing, just incredible. You know, I wore through my boots going around there. It was brilliant fun. But yeah, 8,300 miles on the OEM tyres. I've got nothing to criticise them for.
Brilliant.
Really good tyre.
Then you talk about Dunlop Trail Max Raid.
Yeah, I had a really brief stint just because we were doing some tyre test stuff, and I had a different set of rims on for just under 100 miles, and had the Raids on there. Great tyre, I love them.
What are they, full off-road?
No, they're on-road, but gnarlier, you know, so yeah, they're sort of like an 80-20 split basically, but they're good off-road. Yeah, they're good off-road. Nice blocky tyre, a bit like a Pirelli STR, that sort of look. Actually, they're better than the STR in off-road, I think, but they're noisy. You really hear the front wheel buzz is really
like a Land
quite
Rover
intrusive.
following
Yeah,
you.
it is completely that.
Yeah.
But great tyre, and I actually had them on last year's bike as well, and it's amazing what you can get away with on the road. They're immensely grippy, but just too noisy. But they were only ever going to be a short-lived thing because we were mid-tyre test, and then moved to these, which is the Dunlop Meridians, which are great.
Trail Max Meridian, and you've done 1,900 miles on them so far.
Yep, so again, these tyres were used in the tyre test, so they'd already done about 200 miles before they permanently stayed on the bike.
So what are these, 90-10 split, do you think, or more?
Oh yeah. But they're not, I mean, gravel off-road, great. Mud, no, not at all. But yeah, really tough tyre, but amazingly capable on the road. I mean, again, you know, you're pegged down on a bike like this. Amazing in the wet. I mean, I don't ride any slower in the wet, and you get no sense of any lack of
no jeopardy.
grip. No, not at all.
That's amazing.
Honestly, it's the point where your brain's sort of going, probably should be doing this.
Yeah.
But no, amazing tyre. Again, I've used them before, so I knew they were going to be good. But they really suit the bike. And as you know, some tyres don't suit some bikes, but these really suit the bike. It's they're as good as the Tourance Next. In fact, I slightly prefer them.
Really?
Just get a little bit more feel and feedback.
Yeah.
But yeah, really nice.
It's a good level.
Really nice.
And then finally, you spoke about the other parts you fitted to the bike, the Wunderlich panniers and tank bag system.
Yeah, so actually the bag isn't on there, but you can see the fitting system, so that just clonks on and self-locks, and then you pull a tab and you can take the bag off. Yeah. But I've been using that all year. Really good system. Panniers, yeah, they've been great. The only downside with these is that when it's really raining, when you stop and you open the pannier, it just lets about an egg cup of water into them. It's just like,
They did so well up until that point.
Yeah, but otherwise they've been absolutely brilliant. They fit beautifully, work really nicely. They're properly designed so that the pillion isn't impinged by them as well, so you've still got loads of room. So yeah, nice things.
Evotech rad guards, side stand, foot, fork and swing arm protector bobbins, bar risers, headlamp protector, machine art, Avent fender extender.
That's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. And pyramid rear deflector. Yeah,
so well, the Evotech stuff, obviously bar risers we've talked about. It's got a headlamp mesh on there as well, just to obviously, if you're following someone off-road and you get stones like we're stood on flung into the headlight, that's not a cheap fix, so I think that's a good bit of insurance. Ditto with the rad guards, obviously they're quite well out there, so they are open to getting thumped, so again, just a good bit of insurance. And then ditto on the spindles protectors or fork protectors. And then it's got a big foot on the side stand, so if you are off-road, the side stand foot's quite small, so when you get off and put it down, it just
digs
sinks. Whereas with that big foot on there, it works well. What else? Yes, fender extender on the front, so just to make that front mudguard a good bit longer, just means you're getting less fling over you and over that big front plate as well. And then on the back, basically behind the number plate, there's a pyramid plastics deflector as well, which again just stops it flinging as much stuff over its own back. So yeah, all good little mods actually. There's none of them that I'd criticise. They've done well.
Is there anything else that you'd want to put on this bike if you're going to keep it for any length of time?
No, if I'm honest.
Just the correct luggage at some point?
Correct luggage would obviously be a bonus, and this bike's got an awful lot of accessories on it anyway. It's the Option 719 Tramontana Edition, to give it its full name. So you can see things like the footrests are different. They're all labelled with Option 719, so it's got loads of extra bits and bobs on it already. And it doesn't need anything.
No.
It didn't need really any of the other things I've put on it, but they're just subtle enhancements that make it better. But no, you don't want to keep just adding weight and complexity. It's just more to haul around, isn't it?
So let's wrap up with two questions.
Go on.
Number one is the question everyone wants to know: this or the 1250?
I would take this every time, genuinely. I mean, I love the 1250, absolutely love it, and I've done loads and loads of miles on them. And I've had the 1200 and I've had an 1150, and with each iteration, it gets better in different ways, but it's still better. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is a better bike than the 1250, for all the reasons we've talked about today. So yeah, I'd take this. That's not to say I wouldn't have a 1250.
No.
If price was a deciding factor in the used market, I'd have no qualms about taking a 1250. Absolutely love them, but this is the better bike.
Yeah. So that leads on to the final question: would you buy one?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah. And it's not often I don't hesitate, but yeah, I would buy one. I wouldn't have the Option 719. I wouldn't have sort of quite as much of the bling, if you like, as you've got on this. But yeah, I'd have one. If I needed a bike to do what I do on a bike, which is treat it as a rolling office. It's my primary source of transport. I don't use a car and dabble on a bike. I use a bike and dabble in a car. So my mileage on a bike like this is 3-4 times what I do in my car each year. The car's there for when I've got the family with me. Every other journey, whatever I'm doing, I do on a bike. So it has to be this good, this versatile, this engaging, and yeah, there aren't many that do all of that as well as this. So yeah, I'd buy one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for taking the time to show us around your lovely motorcycle.
It's not quite mine. They won't let me keep it. Well, I want it back. It's really rude, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more long-term test videos like this coming very soon.